I want to go back. I miss it. And we have the new season already. Too long to wait. Welcome to the Irish NFL Show, live in association with QuinnBet. We're back in Ireland, streaming live for the first time since we wrapped our Super Bowl 60 week-long coverage. Thank you for watching, listening, and for getting in touch wherever you are throughout that brilliant and crazy week. Now, we have a different schedule in the off-season, just to let you know. We will be taking a break from the Monday and Thursday live shows, bar this evening, obviously. We'll be putting out our regular diet of interviews and podcasts, so fear not, you will have your regular dose of Irish NFL show to get you through the off-season. And we'll go live, of course, if there's a big trade or if there's some breaking news that we need to jump on. We'll flag that on our social channels, so keep engaged with us there. We will also have live shows when the free agency frenzy kicks off in the week of March 9th, which isn't actually that long to wait now that I say it, because we're halfway through February at this stage. So the lads getting downcast thinking, I thought the break was going to be longer before you were going to start flogging us again. We do have a bit of time to rest and reflect, and we wanted to look back on the season that was, and indeed the Super Bowl that was, before we start into the off-season in earnest. Kieran O'Donovan, Kieran Boyle, Shane Brennan and Brian O'Leary joining me, Conor Brophy, for that recap. We thought we'd start off, Ciaran O'Donovan, and no better man than you to rate the season that's been. All right, the dust has settled, and hopefully the recency bias we can move past. Was it a good, bad, or indifferent season if you factor in the entire season and the Super Bowl that came at the end of it?
Yeah, I was trying to be as positive as I could, and kick the show off on a good note. But I'm not 100% sure it's going to go down as the best season of all time. It did give us some great matchups, and it sprinkled in some classic games throughout the year. And we'll get to some of those in a while. We had some fantastic trilogies. I really enjoyed the Bears Packers trilogy that we were treated to. Seahawks Rams as well served up some really memorable moments. I think we saw the emergence of the NFC West as a powerhouse, the NFC North. But where I thought we were massively lacking this season was the AFC. I thought the AFC really flattered to deceive right throughout the season. I mean, the Patriots had a great story throughout right throughout the season. The Jags gave us a great story, but some of the bright stars from early on, like the Colts, they faded away into obscurity as the season went on. And just the biggest letdown, and we'll talk about disappointments in a while as well, was just the fact that even though I was all for the Chiefs having a down year, I was there for that, no problem, no issue with that. I just didn't see it coinciding with Lamar and the Ravens being out of the picture so early, the Bengals being out of the picture so early. Josh Allen and the Bills gave us some great moments, but again they faded again and missed their opportunity. So I think it was a very heavy, one-sided season. I think all of the strengths and much of the excitement, much of the talking points came on the NFC side, but the AFC I think let down, and you don't want a 32 team or a 2 division or a 2 conference league being so one-sided, and for that reason I wouldn't say it live on in the lore of the greatest seasons of all time.
Well, Shane, it begs to bring you in at this point as the lone, as you often point out, Ranger for the AFC on the show. You're the only person who supports an AFC team. Is that fair? I mean, I think, like, first of all, without being negative either, I kind of doubled down on Kieran's point in that I thought it was an eventful season, and as it was going on, there was plenty of thrills and spills. But I thought, the way I often think, whether you're watching the All-Ireland, whether you're watching the FA Cup, whatever you're watching, the thrills and spills and the upsets are all great until you get to the business end of the season. You're like, actually, this is going to be quite predictable now from here on in, because there's a massive difference between the wheat and the chaff. I enjoyed the season as it went, but as I reflect on it now, I'm kind of left to agree with what Ciaran said, that actually it wasn't a great season. And I think it's the AFC that did kind of let us down in the end.
And I love the AFC, obviously. I'm speaking my heart over my head here, as I was on the Saturday outside Levi's Stadium. Look, I think it's a very fair point. The NFC, we knew coming into the playoffs, whoever won the NFC was going to win the Super Bowl. There's a very clear quality gap. It's funny that
I spent the whole goddamn week in San Francisco trying to convince myself the opposite, Shane. I feel like an idiot now. How did I not see that coming?
I felt like in San Fran, Shane.
Well, I felt like an idiot because I got off the bus on the Super Bowl Sunday, and I just felt it in the air. And I'm like, the Seahawks are winning this match, and I'm gonna be make look like an absolute cod during the thing. Not Ciaran O'Donovan, like an actual
fresh cod.
So I tell you, the Eamon Duffy quotes are flying this evening.
But I guess just in terms of the actual quality, look, the fact that the AFC have come in with this sort of core 4 of great quarterbacks that we always talk about before every season, and only one of them made the playoffs, and even then, like, they didn't fulfill the potential in the way that it should have been. It definitely leaves you. It leaves you feeling unfulfilled. I think it's almost like eating a Chinese meal. You feel like it felt good in the moment, but you're hungry again an hour later. That's kind of the way it was with some of the AFC. And as much as people are, I think, are looking back and saying, "Oh, thank God we don't have to watch the Chiefs again," and getting sick of watching them. When they're not in there, you realize actually, there's a quality there, there's a greatness there, which when it's not in the playoffs, it does lack something, it does miss something. Now, let the door open for a weaker team to progress through to the Super Bowl on that side of things. And look, I mean, what do we want in the season overall? Do we want to see the same 3 or 4 teams doing well every year, like we're watching Barcelona, Real Madrid in the Liga? No, we want to have teams flipping from up to down. We want to have hope where there was no hope before. And we got plenty of that across the league. But again, a lot of that was on the NFC side of things. We talked about Chicago, I think, being one of the great stories. But definitely, look coming near the end of the playoffs, the AFC playoffs in particular were disappointing because Houston had great potential, didn't show up. Denver had the problem with the quarterback. It was Josh Allen's year to go and take it and to try and seal his position as being spoken about as one of the greats among Patrick Mahomes of our era, and he didn't take that opportunity. And even the Chargers as well. You look at the piece that they could have put together, and injuries kind of went against them. It was a very clear quality gap, not quite to the level as it was in the 80s back when the NFC went on, what was it, a 13-14 season run of winning the Super Bowl consistently. It wasn't, didn't quite feel like that, but you definitely want coming into next year that the big guns in the AFC, you want to see your Lamar Jacksons, your Joe Burrows, and your Patrick Mahomes fit on a team that's coherent and in a position where they can sort of bring back these gladiatorial battles, which I think a lot of people were missing from this year's postseason.
Kieran, Boyle, I don't know if you see it differently, but I mean, to both Shane and Kieran's point, I thought by the time you got to where everything was really in the mixer, you arrive in the playoffs, even on the NFC side, you have a 49ers team who did brilliantly to get as far as they did, given the injuries that they battled. And we made this point many, many times. We didn't get the best version of the 49ers then, and they were ruthlessly dispatched in the playoffs as a result. Lions weren't there, Ravens weren't there, Chiefs weren't there, and the Eagles didn't show up in anything like the form that they were in when they won the Super Bowl last year, and it just diluted the overall quality, I found. Now, that's great to Shane's point, meant for a great run for the Broncos, great run for the Patriots, great run for the Bears, and so it was something of a season for the teams that haven't been doing well for a while, and there was something in it for the underdog, and that's nice as well, and it lent the season a flavour, but the quality was lacking.
Yeah, I think that when you look back on the season, I think you're right. I think the quality did kind of lack overall. I think we started the season off well. Week 1 was the the Ravens and the Bills game when Lamar kind of threw it away, and that was the fumbles, and it was kind of like, oh, this is going to be a repeat performance from the Ravens. But I think overall, with the fact that the Chiefs it was a down year for them, and they weren't really a factor. Obviously, it left the door open for the Bills, and they got as far as they could. I'm not as down on the AFC as maybe Shane and Kieran are. I mean, we still have the Jags and the Texans kind of slugging it out in that AFC South division, which has been dormant for decades almost. So there was a little bit of hope in there, but I think the overall theme, I mean, for me, when the
Colts made a run there too as well.
Yeah,
they ran out of steam.
Yeah, but for me, the overall, when I think of the season, what sticks out for me the most is defense. Defense just dominated for me the entire season. I mean, the teams that were stacked on defense and had depth on defense are the ones that ultimately ended up in the playoffs. And the teams that didn't and were paper thin on the defense, such as, we saw Tampa Bay, really struggle to keep the ball out of the red zone. And of course the Lions, who just weren't able to deal with all the injuries. So for me, defense is really what sticks out in the entire season. And we did have, with the Chiefs kind of slipping and the Eagles flattering to deceive most of the season. Obviously, the Bengals are just, they're just stuck in perpetual kind of hell right now with what's going on with that team. So I think, defense just stood out for me. And those teams that were stacked enough and had depth enough and were able to carry that through. However, when the playoffs happened and the teams with, predominantly defensive teams, such as the Texans and the Broncos, it kind of came to a shuddering halt on the other side of the ball. They just weren't able to get it done. So I think primarily defense sticks out to me for this 25 season.
To that point, Brian, and I might look to you maybe to kind of look back from the perspective of the Super Bowl that's, just gone in the rearview mirror now, Super Bowl 60. I was having this debate with a couple of people in work today, a couple of other NFL fans, and we were saying, like, some people said, oh, it was a terrible Super Bowl. I didn't think it was a terrible Super Bowl, actually, to the point that Kieran just made, because we saw what, to my mind, and the figures bear this out, the analysis bears this out over the course of the season, one of historically the best defenses we've ever seen put on an absolute masterclass in that game. And to give them their great credit, the Patriots made a game of it much longer than should have been the case, because they really stepped up and played great defense for the most part and kept the Seahawks out of the end zone to keep it close.
Yeah, similar kind of conversations that I had over the past week, kind of when I returned to work. Disappointing Super Bowl, staying up very late to watch that game. It was very one-sided.
It's not all about offense, right? There's three phases to the game.
No, and I was referred to being boys because we were there, but no, it was sublime defensive strategic planning around where the holes were in that offensive line for the Patriots, and the Seahawks continuously went after it time and time again. And to the Patriots' credit, they stuck in there as best they could, even at 9.5 time. Was they were in the game, it never really felt like they were in the game. It felt more like a 16-7 type of game. But sometimes you have to acknowledge, like, the defense win championships, and we were tongue-in-cheek saying that during that week, where we're kind of, is it not necessarily on Sam Darnold's, within his remit to go and win this game. They can rely on this defense, and the defense has stood up time and time again over the course of the season. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know Shane didn't sit beside me for those 3.5 quarters. It was great to see Shane get his independent article ready in the fourth quarter as opposed to having to wait till the end. But
do you not enjoy to your point, he was sitting beside you, or because the Patriots lost?
A bit of combination of both, I imagine, there, Conor. But no, I agree with you. Like, we didn't get to see the Seahawks like firsthand. Like, we're quite fortunate. We go to the international series. We had a number of games in which we travelled over to stateside this year. It's like a really successful year for the show. But Seahawks was a team that was omitted from our watch list. We hadn't got a chance to see them firsthand. So to see them in the Super Bowl, see what the masterful display they put on, and to see that kind of where we were in the stadium situated, to see that kind of walk off, essentially game-winning touchdown where they took the interception and returned it. It was significant. We straight away, you're talking about next season. They're favourites to the Super Bowl 61. Maybe it's a bit too early to be getting into that level of conversation, but if they can keep that team together with a very young head coach, they could be thereabouts again.
I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Brian, just for moment of the season, but I'm going to throw my own 2 cents in here because it.
Don't pick mine.
What you just said. Well, that's why I want to go first, because I want to get mine out there before somebody picks it. I have to frantically come up with another one on the spot. But my moment of the season was Sam Darnold winning the Super Bowl. I think for me, it wasn't just a redemption story for him. It hopefully, and it won't really fundamentally change, but it may start to at least leaven the way that people dismiss players and quarterbacks in particular, who are drafted high and who don't immediately splash in the league. Because, I mean, this is a guy who only over the past 2 seasons has pulled on the Earthworm Jim supersuit and become a completely different player. Do you like that reference, Shane? I'm trying to tailor my references to a younger demographic. That's not really my generation, but I'm putting in the work to kind of come up with stuff that would be more relevant to you. I'm putting in the man hours here. But guy who was drafted high by the Jets, God loved him. God love him going there, and almost had his career ruined as a result. And it's mad to think, even as of last season, and we'll get to this a little bit later, or I'll get to it in another context before we wrap up this evening, that last year, and we, to a certain extent, were buying into this too, and I have to hold my hands up and say that I bought into it a little bit. We're dismissing him again, saying, yeah, he'll only get you so far, and look what happened against the Rams in the playoffs last year, and look what happened when they were playing the Lions when he was at the Vikings for the number 1 seed. Again, once the pressure's on, he sees ghosts and he collapsed. And we probably weren't fair to the state of the Vikings line at that point and how that rebounded on him and constrained what he was able to do against, to be fair, also 2 really good defenses and 2 really strong defensive coordinators in Chris Shula and Brian Flores. And it turns out that in the right setting and with the right team around him, Sam Darnold flourished. And, we get to games of the season as well. Sam Darnold, to my mind, played in a couple of the games of the season and played a great part in them, not least the NFC Championship game. He did everything that could have been required of him. And he bore the whole thing, I thought, with unbelievable dignity. And I don't just mean this season, I mean the whole season. Like, we talked about it in Super Bowl week, and we talked about it in the run-up to the Super Bowl, how this guy has been basically answering the same goddamn question for about 5 years, which boils down to, why are you not good enough? And I'm just reflecting, Brian, on the fact that, we were both in Allegiant Stadium 3 years ago for the Super Bowl, and Sam Darnold was the backup to Brock Purdy when the Niners lost that game. And 3 years later, he's back from the dead. Everybody had forgotten about him then. He's a backup. People probably couldn't have even named the backup for the 49ers because Brock Purdy is so generally durable and had played throughout that season. And what a story that is. And that for me was the moment of the season. I was delighted for him, and I was delighted for what his story means for a lot of quarterbacks who've been kicked up and kicked down the league. I know, you can say, oh, bring out your tiny violin for the multimillionaires, but man, it's a goldfish bowl. And I was reflecting on it when we were in the tent after the game for the post-game interviews at the Super Bowl. Before we went to the Seahawks side, I popped in, firstly, to see Mike Vrabel, and secondly, to see what Drake May had to say. And, just to give people a flavour of how close you are to the players and how intimate that setting is. It's a tent out on the playing field beside the stadium. So if you've been to the Aviva Stadium for rugby games or for soccer matches, if you've pictured the practice pitch out the back of the Aviva, it's that close to the main stadium. There's a marquee on that pitch, and it's divided into the Seahawks go on one side, the Patriots go on the other, and you are arm's length away from players, coaches, whoever they are, and there's no place to hide because they're contractually bound to be there. So they bring in all of the best players, all the top players, all the big talking points from the game, and they have to account for themselves, good, bad, or indifferent to the media. And, you're close enough to see the tears in Mike Vrabel's eyes and to see the colour drain from his skin, and close enough to hear Drake May's voice cracking and to see how broken he is and to see the pressure that's on him and people just asking him straight out, where did it go wrong? Why didn't you play better? And it's, at the same time, you can hear the Seahawks players celebrating through the tent because it's only a marquee, and you can smell the cigar smoke. It's brutal. It is just brutal. And yeah, they're compensated really, really well for it. But I mean, Sam Darnold has been through that year in, year out, week in, week out, team in, team out, and finally came out the other side of it. So sorry, I've over-talked there, but that, Brian, is my moment of the season. What's yours?
Conor, you're going to love my moment of the season. Kieran is not going to love it. And Shane will think this is hilarious, friend of mine, the irony of what we spoke about time and time again in the last year since we've done that show. DJ Moore's walk-off touchdown for the Bears in Soldier Field. Not so much because it's a fantastic play. It was, and they put it all on Williams to go and make that huge play in overtime. But more about the enormity of actually the Bears finally getting over the hump. Because for years, the Packers have owned the Bears. And you even spoke about during the season where you were covering the game in Tottenham last year, and the Bears were putting up a comprehensive victory against the Jags, and yet all the Bears fans were worried about was slagging off Packers. It was as if they're living in their heads with rent-free. I think now it's kind of reverse now. I think the Bears are living in the Packers and rent-free because of those two games at the back end of the season. But that game was so strange in a way. It has a kind of similarities to the other game. The Packers were so dominant. It took huge plays, an onside kick at the end for the Bears to even put themselves in a position, and a bit of a Hail Mary type of touchdown at the end, which is not too dissimilar to what the Bears got against the Rams. But the love affair with the Bears towards the end of the season, and in a roundabout way, it's a kind of crying shame that they didn't find a way into the championship game, because I think we might have got a really compelling game as well. As much as we got with the Rams and the Seahawks, I think we would have been, found ourselves in a great spot there to see a lovely Bears-Seahawks championship game. But the Bears have struggled for year in, year out to get over the hump. Ben Johnson is a great head coach. Everyone knew he was a great head coach, but it was a kind of get to the stage where they find that signature victory, and that puts them in a good state going into the playoffs to actually go and beat the Packers. And I know you touched on that inevitability where if the Bears got into the playoffs and they played the Packers, they would lose, but they didn't lose. But it took a lot to get them over the hump. And the celebrations in Soldier Field that night was like this wave of 20 years of depression that Bears fans have been going through, and to finally get over the line, and the nature of that touchdown. And the one piece that really sticks in my mind was the press conference where Williams said, I can't say enough about these coaching staff. They trust me to go and make plays like that. And then they came out and said the same about the quarterback. Look, every NFL season is very different, Conor. If I was a Bears fan right now, I'd be looking at that 25-1 that Quinn have and thinking, why not the Bears next season? Because they were very close. They've got a lot of steps.
What do you mean you would? I bet you've already done it, haven't you?
He went when it was still 30-1. That's why the price.
I won't lie. That's why it dropped. I got it early. Look, Ben Johnson is not complacent either. Conor, we spoke about it over at the Super Bowl. We spoke about a lot of different teams, but he said, look, we're where everybody else is now. We're going to start again, rebuild and go again next season. But for Bears fans who've being in the doldrums for many years, to see that victory and the nature of that game, and it was a Saturday night game, so everyone got to watch it as a single game in prime time, as opposed to something that was just popping off in red zone towards the back end of a game where Scott Hansen's jumping from one screen to another. For fans to be able to enjoy that on a Saturday night was very compelling, and that, for me, is my moment of the season.
Kieran, I don't know if you've had to listen to that, so I'll let you move the narrative on very quickly and pick your moment of the season. I'm sure Brian hasn't robbed your moment of the season from you there.
Well, I flip-flop between two, and just going to give an honourable mention to the Micah Parsons injury. It's not my favourite moment of the season, but I think it's a pivotal moment of the season.
Interesting. I was gonna call that not as moment of the season, that's something to be celebrated, but I thought it was the sliding doors moment of the season. Yeah, go on.
And not so much in terms of how far could the Packers have gone, because I really don't believe the Packers were built to go very deep into the playoffs. I'm actually looking at the knock-on effect, the kind of butterfly effect. How much did it potentially elevate how we're looking back on the Bears season? Because those games, there was such fine margins in those two Bears victories against the Packers. You'd wonder, would they have gone on to would the Packers maybe have stolen one, if not both of those games? And you'd imagine if they had won the second game, the trilogy would have concluded in Lambeau. So look, there's all kinds of permutations to that, but I'm looking at the AFC side and what it may have done in terms of possibly costing the Broncos one more game, because the Packers were in control of that game with when Parsons went down. If they get over the line there, maybe the Broncos lose a seeding. Maybe the Bills aren't going to Mile High, and the Bills were so close. I mean, the Bills, we forget about the fact that the Bills were beaten in overtime. And we had that another moment of the year where there was the catch, that the interception that could have been a reception, so just such fine margins. I think that Micah Parsons' injury had a huge effect on a knock-on effect on many teams, and not most the Packers, strangely. But I'm going to just divert from that. I'm going to get very parochial and emotional for a second. The moment of the season for me was sitting in Croke Park when the girl up the road here in West Cork sang the national anthem, when Lyra gave the most stunning, most powerful rendition of Our On Naveen I've ever heard in my life. And I grew up, my childhood, all throughout my childhood, the pinnacle of any sporting event was to travel to Croke Park for an All-Ireland final. And yes, I did get to go to a lot of them. And yes, I did get to see Cork win a few early on. But for all the renditions of Our On Naveen I've heard, that was the most powerful, most stunning rendition of our national anthem. And it just, I'm an emotional guy when it comes to the national anthem. I had tears in my eyes when she was finished, and it just, for me, it really brought home how Ireland put itself on the global stage, in hosting this event for the first time, in hosting an NFL regular season game. And I think the people involved, even listening to Clada belting out their bangers throughout the game, it just brought home how well this event was staged and how ready we were for the occasion. And so that was my moment of the season. It was just an immensely prideful moment for me.
Oh, lovely. I'm tearing up just listening to you. Ciaran Boyle, I'll give you the unenviable task of following that. What's your moment of
Jesus, how am I supposed to... Jesus.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. Well, similar to Brian's, mine has to be the Cole Kmet catch. It's just one of those moments where, the game is on the line. Caleb's scrambling. Where's he going to go? He retreats, 20 odd yards back, yokes it up in between. I think it was Durant and Quentin Lake as well, got in between those two. And the catch, the moment, everything about it. I mean, the dog scared the crap out of the dog. He starts running around the place, jumping up and down with the sun, because it's one of those really cool moments that only the NFL brings. When things look down and out for the Bears, it looked like they've just exhausted every avenue. But
it's funny you say it, because I was watching the 49ers documentary that you recommended, and if anyone watching hasn't seen it, just go and watch it. The AMC one, the rise of the Niners. Whether you're a Niners fan or not, amazing. Like, the first episode basically leads up to the Dwight Clark catch and how that changed the whole trajectory of that franchise. And the Cole Kmet catch kind of felt similar to that in Chicago.
Oh, beautiful. I mean, it's just the randomness of it, the fact that, you see Williams retreating, he yokes it up, who knows where the ball is going to go, and then the screen pans to a lone Cole Kmet in the corner. Safeties and corners all over the place, don't know where the ball is going, and he comes down with the catch untouched. It was a phenomenal moment. I think what it meant for the Bears, we know how the game finished, but, that was probably the pinnacle and the highlight of the whole season for the Bears. Just a great moment. One of those that will be replayed, through the decades. Obviously, it won't be as kind of well known as the Clark catch, but still, a really, really cool moment this season. I do want to give an honorable mention to kickers. I know I crap on kickers a lot, and I will. It's a fact. I'm not the biggest fan of kickers in the world, but I will give a shout out to the Jags.
Good
kickers.
God Almighty!
As God is my witness, I'm going to praise somebody. I was at the preseason game. It was the first game of the season against the Steelers in a very, very hot and sweaty Everbank Stadium, and Little came out and dropped a 70. I think it was measured at 73 yards when all was done. Just a great moment. He's a hell of a character, and I think that was just a nice kind of kickoff for the Jag season and where it led. But that was a cool moment watching the longest ever recorded field goal. Whether you can debate whether it was a real stat or whatever, because it hasn't gone on the record books, but still to watch it live was pretty cool.
That's a great call, actually. And it just reminded me of Brian, when you and I talked to Jeff Duncan from the Times-Picayune in New Orleans, covers the Saints, great beat writer and a great friend of the show, and he was talking about watching Charlie Smith, who we were lucky enough to meet in San Francisco at the consulate general in San Francisco, and thanks to the consul general Michal Smith for inviting us along to that occasion. But he was saying Charlie Smith is pinging them over from 70 yards in practice. Like, I don't know whether the Saints are due to go to Mile High this year, but that will be one to watch next season. That might be. I'd like to get the QuinnBet odds on Charlie Smith corking a 70-yarder in a game, if not next season, at some point. It certainly seems like he has the leg for it. Shane, your moment of the season.
I can't remember, was it against the Falcons or against the Panthers, when Charlie Smith hit the winning field goal? He turned and he looked at the opposition bench with his arms out like Christ the Redeemer, like, yeah, I'm that guy. That was the moment where I'm like, yeah, he's fully tuned into the American culture here. Down county footballers don't do that, but he's doing it. He's properly looking at and making sure that his division rivals know that he's the top gun. So I have to give him that there, and that's sort of my.
Have you seen Top Gun yet? By the way,
no, I have not. I was about
your off-season homework. You were supposed to watch it before we went to San Francisco.
I should have watched it on the plane. It was on Aer Lingus, and I just decided to watch the Shawshank Redemption instead. I don't ask me why. So anyway, but my moment of the season, right? I'll be brief with this one, but this one I found funny. Week 5, Monday Night Football, Jacksonville Jaguars against the Kansas City Chiefs. Trevor Lawrence takes the ball, falls over his own offensive lineman, manages to get up. 2 Chiefs defenders can't get him. He manages to run to the left-hand side. Another 2 Chiefs defenders, for some reason, aren't awake enough to tackle him. He gets over the line and scores the winning touchdown. It makes the Chiefs go to 2-3 and puts the Jags at 4-1. Talk about the trajectory of both of these seasons. I was the idiot who spent most of the season expecting the Chiefs are going to wake up this week, lads. They're going to wake up this week, and they never did. And this is the thing. I think like the psychological damage of being absolutely embarrassed by the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 59, I think, was shown by a lack of concentration in a key moment here. And then the Jaguars were able to build off this to be one of the good news stories. And I definitely think that we're looking ahead next year to be one of the better sides. I know they had maybe a bit of a down afterwards, because this is a week or two before they went and played in Wembley, one of the worst London games we've seen. And that's saying something, because some of these London games haven't been very entertaining. But yeah, that was if I'm going for a slightly left field one, I'm going for that one. I thought that was a very telling moment for both of these teams early in the season, as it turned out.
We'll recap on more of the highlights from the season just gone and look to some of the things that we'll be watching in the off season right after this.